What up? What up? Legendary Talks. I think this is episode 86, but I always get confused and distracted and don't remember, as I've been told several times. We are getting ready for our 100th episode in about 2 weeks. I'm very excited about that. How's everybody doing? Legendary Talks here. We have an amazing guy tonight that I'm very excited to chat with. A real New York City legend, David Rabin, and he's right on time. Perfect. Everybody get ready. Legendary David Rabin. Hey, Claudine. Hey,
Hi, Dame.
how are you?
I'm doing well.
I dressed up for you, first of all.
Thank you. I knew I couldn't even match you, so I just went with the black T-shirt.
Well, I thank you for doing this as your first IG Live, right?
It is my first IG Live.
I feel very flattered and honored. Eric LaPoe is on here. Frank Roberts is on here. People are joining right now, so I'm excited. Everyone's excited.
The Lotus Crew.
I don't think that you're aware, but I do something called Legendary Talks pretty much every night of the week since quarantine. I've done 86 episodes, and we celebrate people that have been important to culture. I mentioned a little bit about it, but we've had people that have been really important to culture, specifically New York culture. Some are well known, some are not well known. That doesn't matter. The people have been really important to culture. So I thought that obviously you would be an amazing person.
I'll do my best, Dave.
I usually the first question I ask everyone is to describe themselves. I like when people describe themselves.
Fair enough. I like to say I'm in it, but not of it, if you will, in terms of this life. It's a funny thing. I'm home on the Upper West Side. Everyone thinks I live downtown, somewhere near Lotus, and I live on the Upper West Side with my teenage son and my wife and our new puppy. So while I very much love everything I've been doing for the last, since I quit being a lawyer, which is about 30 years ago now, I also like sort of retreating back to, you might call the Upper West Side the suburbs compared to where we all work or usually. And so I guess, yeah, that's, at the end of the day, it's about family for me, but I do love what we do.
Yeah, no, I've always liked not living in the center either of it all because it's too much. You kind of live it, so you have to go somewhere else. I always lived not in the, the area. I've always lived uptown or somewhere else, so you're not in the middle of it all, which I think you need that.
You do. It's funny because when we had Lotus in the Double Seven, and I would walk around the meatpacking district. I couldn't get a break back then, and which was fun and sort of nice to know your neighborhood. And when Soho House was brand new, but up here I'm just Tyler's dad, or the grumpy guy from Equinox who wants you to wipe down your machine.
Well, it's important, people that have, I call them lifers, people that have been done this for many, many years. It's important to have a balance. It can't just be all fabulous, as we know, so.
Well, never going to be as fabulous as you. Look at you and look at me. So.
You know what I mean, though. So you're born in New York, correct?
Yes, Syosset, Long Island.
Yeah. I'm kind of obsessed with New York in the 70s and 80s. New York has fascinated me my whole life. I wasn't there yet. Describe, I guess, New York City in the 70s and 80s from your view.
I think that I missed it by about a year or two. I think I got to studio and Xenon in about 1980, 81.
Got it.
So I was in college, dating a girl, lived in the city, and, somehow we were magically escorted into all these places, and it was insane. I mean, for us in high school, even though it was only 45 minutes from the city, big thing was going to the weekend football party. All of a sudden, I went to college up in Boston, and people started saying, "Oh, you got to go to studio. Oh, you got to go to Xenon," and it was like a world opened up, for me, and I felt so much more at home. And yeah, I was able to get into both. I don't think that was I think probably Palladium and Nell's and even Peggy Sue's were probably for me, which were mid to late 80s, MK, early 90s, just before we did Rex, which was 1990. And actually, my one recollection that I don't know if you got to Area, but I was in Area. I was in law school, and we went to Area. I think Howard Schaefer might have been doing the door. We went to Area. There was like 8 people there. They were so happy to see us, and I went back 3 weeks later on a date, and there were maybe 5,000 people in the street. I thought, oh, I'm going to be so cool. I'm taking this girl to this amazing, cool club that no one knows about. And I'm quite clueless. Obviously did not get in that night. But, yeah, my Mars was a big one for me. I used to love Mars on the West Side Highway. I would say my sort of main spots were Palladium and Nell's before we started doing our own.
I had Jessica Rosenblum on here about 2 months ago, and she had so many amazing stories about that specific kind of like that late 80s era, about all those clubs you mentioned too. And, it's really interesting. But that's why I think it's really important to document this kind of stuff, because that's all before my time. And
she was the queen. She was so powerful. And, I mean, that door, I was lucky. I knew some of those guys from my gym up on the Upper West Side. And then I got to know Jessica. But I had a weird in back then, because I was, I don't even know if you know that I was a lawyer, but one of our clients at the firm was Al B. Shore, right when he had the song Night and Day. And,
oh, wow.
He walked into my law firm before he was, maybe 2 weeks before he was famous. And, he was wearing a jacket that said Al B. Shore. I don't know what came over me. I just kind of passed him in the hallway. He was a good-looking young guy. I just said, come on, man, your mom didn't name you Al B. Shore. And he started laughing, and I started laughing. And anyway, I ended up getting assigned to his contract negotiations, and I got to meet Andre Harrell and Roussell and that whole world. And so I was starting to get invited because of Al to some of these parties. And then I ran into my partner for 20-something years, Will Regan, who I had gone to college with. And back then, in the late 80s, in Jessica's era at the door, Will was living with Iman. And so, they were the best looking couple on the planet, basically. And, we kind of went in wherever we wanted. And it was almost because of that we ended up doing Rex, because I really didn't like being a lawyer, and Will really didn't like being on Wall Street. And, one night we were at Nell's and sitting at a table and chatting with various supermodels and Calvin Klein. And I was sort of bewildered by the whole thing. And we sort of had too many shots of tequila and said, we should quit our jobs and open one of these places. And about a year later, we did.
That's amazing. Because some people say that kind of stuff and then they don't really do it. They're drunk and like, yeah, let's forget our jobs. But you guys did it, which is amazing. And then, obviously we know how that turned out for you. So,
well, it worked out. Look, the irony is the first place that we did, which was called Rex, which was before your time, which was 90 to 92, it coincided exactly with the sort of the era of the supermodel, the Linda, Cindy, Naomi moment. And because Will was with Iman for 5 years, they broke up right around the time of Rex, but those were his friends. And so we opened this place up, this little dinky townhouse on 6th Avenue and 16th Street that had been a lesbian little hidden nightclub, and then a Polish disco. And somehow we got a hold of it and opened this place. And for some reason, because of Will's these were his closest sort of friends, every night you'd walk in and there was someone unbelievably famous in there. And like 3 months earlier, we were reading leases and mortgages. So we didn't know what we were doing. If it had been the era of bottle service, we would have been fine. We would have made money. We made no money. But every night the crowd was spectacular, and it kind of led to everything else. I mean, our DJs, I was thinking about it today on a bike. Our DJs back then were Stretch, Clark Kent, a guy named Jules, who now lives in LA, who was one of the best.
I know Jules. Yeah.
Oh my God, he's the greatest. He actually played our wedding, which was just one big dance party. But yeah, that was
I did the door at Cheetah, and Jules was the DJ there on
right?
Belinda's night. Yeah, Belinda's night. It's funny because you mentioned area, and I think areas come up in pretty much every single talk that I've had with someone that's from that time period. I don't want to say that era, but area is, I didn't go, and I wish it was before my time, but that sounds like it was the most amazing thing, like during that time,
Well, it was the most amazing thing, I think, even till now. I mean, they changed it in 6 weeks. It was basically Serge and Eric's art project, and a lot of the stuff that you would see in a standard hotel with the people pretending not to see you through the glass, all that was pioneered at Area. Those guys were geniuses, sort of mad geniuses.
Who was the first celebrity that came in Rex that you remember and kind of be like, oh my God, a celebrity's in my place?
You know, honestly, Damon, it was, I mean, it was Rex was, I mean, De Niro, I mean, of that era, Warren Beatty, Richard Gere, Mick Jagger.
Wow.
I mean, what really put us on the map was a model named Cara Young married Sante Dorazio.
Yeah.
Photographer, and we had the wedding party.
Oh, wow.
And so you just can't imagine who their guest list was, right? It was every famous person on the planet. If it was today, it would have been, you know, but there was no Instagram then. But Axl Rose was dating Stephanie Seymour at that time, and they came. And so that was that really put us on the map in a big way. That,
oh, wow.
I think, I'm sure this would lead to debate amongst my peers, but I think we had the first end of Fashion Week fashion party because Will got Christy, Naomi, Cindy, and Linda to have a barbecue, a jeans and burgers barbecue at Rex.
Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
So that was pretty insane.
And then do you think that, you know, all the kind of 80s and the 80s kind of nightclubbing that you had done, did that influence Rex, or was it kind of like, you know, how did it influence your involvement in Rex, I guess, creatively?
Well, you know, we loved live music, and so Rex was one of the last places that I could think of, although Nels had it, and they did a beautiful job with it at Nels. So it was definitely derivative in certain aspects. I mean, there was a place called Peggy Sue's, which maybe no one's ever mentioned or has mentioned to you, but that was a real... Jessica did. Yeah, hot, sweaty. You didn't go there to preen. Like, you would be out of place. You looked too good. You had to go there in a T-shirt and be ready to just sweat through your shirt. So it was sort of the antidote to MK. They were kind of in existence at the same time. And Rex was sort of an odd combo of maybe Peggy Sue's and Nels. We had live music after dinner downstairs, and then a dance club on the second floor. And excuse the name drop, but my close friend is Brad Johnson, who owned Roxbury at the same time in LA, and one of his best friends is Denzel Washington. So he would send Denzel, when Denzel was in New York, to Rex because he knew he would be looked after and no one would. And to this day, he remembers that he was uncomfortable on the dance floor because it would literally droop almost into the kitchen below it. And he's like, oh yeah, the droopy dance floor. That's all he remembers me for. He doesn't know my name. He's like, oh yeah, man, you're the guy with that club with the droopy dance floor. Like, yeah, that's me. So it was a good run. We were influenced by all those places. I mean, it was a different time in New York. You know, it's like, I don't know if anyone's referenced Steve Lewis, but, you know, I don't know, about 15 years ago, he wrote an article that said the new VIP is any guy with a black card. And I thought he was being overly dramatic, but he wasn't. He wasn't. He was right. Yeah. Whereas at our time, it was who's the coolest dressing, who's the artist that's just coming up, who's got the new song that you only know about. I mean, that was what mattered, not you know, could you afford a $10,000 table?
Yeah.
That didn't even cross our minds.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we'll get into that later, basically. So, okay. You know, bottle service. But that brings me to, so after Rex, you did Lotus, correct?
Well, no, there's a little gap, and you tell me how much you want to know, but we worked for a smidgen of time for Peter Gatien, helping run the USA, which was really an eye-opening experience because Peter was a machine. I mean, he had, at one moment, he had Limelight, Palladium, Tunnel, and USA. So
my first job in New York was at Limelight. I was 18, so I worked directly with Peter as well.
So think about today, and think about a guy who could fill 4 clubs with 3,000 to 4,000 people each night. I mean, it's insane to watch the guy work. And in the middle of working for him, we got a random phone call from someone that I kind of tangentially knew in law school, saying that they wanted to open the quote-unquote Studio 54 of Russia. And we were very skeptical, but we went to the office for the meeting, and it was palatial offices on Fifth Avenue. 2 weeks later, we were in Moscow with the actual designers of Studio 54.
Wow, amazing.
And we opened about a year later, right in the heart of Red Square. We opened basically the first for real Western style nightclub in Russia.
What was it called?
It was called Manhattan. It was the one thing I objected to, and they were right. It was called Manhattan Express, which made my skin crawl. But I was trying to suggest anything else that represented Gotham, if you will. But they said, look, it's too soon. No one understands those subtleties. We have to hit them over the head. And, Moscow, I don't know if you've ever been, Damon, but Moscow is built like a circle. It's not like New York, a grid. We were literally dead center. If the U.S. was ever going to drop a bomb, they would have dropped it on us. We were across the street from the Kremlin. My view out my window of our hotel suite was the Kremlin and St. Basil's Cathedral. And we had about a 400-person supper club, 100 for dinner, turned into a supper club. And we came back in 95. It was a 2-year consulting agreement. And we had learned from John McDonald, who was, Lure Fish Bar and all. He had Merc Bar at the time. And John really changed us a little bit because he explained how much easier it was to make money from owning a bar like Merc Bar than it was to run a club with security and doormen. So we did a little bar on Park Avenue South called Union Bar that was kind of a revelation to us because it did so well without having all the sort of rigmarole of nightlife. And then I had my Godfather 3 Al Pacino kind of moment when a broker called me about some strip club that was going out of business on West 14th Street. And at the time, I was the president of the New York Nightlife Association, which is why my hair is all gray under this hat. But I knew how stringent the cabaret laws were going to be and community boards were going to be, and how hard it was going to be to get licensed to do nightclubs going further. So we went to see it and kind of, kicking and screaming, we're like, God, we kind of have to do this place. It's spectacular. It's licensed. The rent is low. There are no neighbors by statute, no residential neighbors in that neighborhood, so no one can complain. And we reached out to, Will and I we weren't even 40, but we had been in Russia and then do a Union Bar. We reached out to Baker and Ja to see if they wanted to step up from being promoters and actually become owners. And that's, thankfully they did. It was a little crazy. Mark Baker, he's wonderful. Our first meeting with Mark was at Union Bar. We had these giant windows that opened up out to Park Avenue South, but we were a little bit elevated. So it was about a 7-foot drop. He was the only person that ever jumped out the window of Union Bar, but he saw some gorgeous girl on a bike riding up Park Avenue South. And he literally in the middle of a meeting, jumped up on the couch, jumped out the window. And I looked at Will and I'm like, are we really going into business with these guys? They're a little distracted.
You're like, this could be a great idea or a terrible idea. I don't know yet.
Depending on the day, it was both.
True.
They turned out to be phenomenal.
We'll call it an artist's mind. How about that?
There you go. Fair enough.
Okay, so then that brings us to Lotus now, right? Okay. So Lotus, obviously is where you and I became, got to know each other and things. But Lotus, for all intents and purposes, I think was one of the best nightclubs of the past, 3 decades, And maybe you're too close to it, but, people, actually you describe Lotus. You describe Lotus from your perspective.
I think we really hit a moment. Every once in a while you get lucky, and there's nothing else that has really opened recently before or too recently after. And I'll tell you why I'm going to say for 13 months, but for about 13 months, I don't think there was anything like it since maybe 10 years, 15 years earlier. For whatever combination of reasons, Will and my old school friends and my inclination towards sort of old school music and, the Sunday night kind of music that we would play, and Mark and Jeffrey's incredible relationships with the fashion industry of that moment and the modeling industry of that moment. So whereas my friends were at that time, let's call it 30 to 50, their friends were 19 to 29. And we were able to put everybody in the same room. It was big enough. And the neighborhood, as I alluded to earlier, was perfect because really no one could complain. They could complain, but at the end of the day, they had no right to. So I think we sort of bottled, we caught something in a bottle, a zeitgeist moment. it just worked. I mean, it was a tremendous amount of work. That I thought the food was great. It used to drive me nuts how busy we were Thursday, Friday, Saturday for dinner. And people say, wow, the food is amazing. I had no idea. I'm like, it's the same on Tuesday. But no one wanted to come on a Tuesday for dinner. And then, you know, we grew that beautiful Sunday night with Frank and everybody. And it was just, you know, the perfect end of the week for me. That ended up being my favorite night that I never missed. But you know, you're right. I'm a little close to it. I mean, what I love to hear about, I meet people who tell me they got married because of Lotus. Actually,
yeah, no. I mean, there's so many amazing stories.
Bad name drop, but I've become good friends with her over the years. But actually, she got engaged at Jimmy and married at the Skylark. But Misty Copeland met her husband at Lotus on Sunday night.
True story, 100%. Yeah.
We're great friends, but I didn't even. Go ahead.
Frank Roberts is on here, Goldfinger, Henry, Beverly Bond. They're all giving you shout outs. I just want to make sure you know all that. So.
Oh, that's nice.
Erica Hamilton, they're all shouting you out. Yeah, Lotus to me was, you know, a moment in time. I have friends that, you know.
That's funny. Wait, Damon, I saw just Henri's name there. That was the fastest interview of my life.
Tell me.
Well, we had a meeting at at our PR firm in the Flatiron Building, and I had arranged for, God knows how we arranged things back then because no one had these phones. I had arranged to meet with Henri right after that PR meeting, and I came out of the Flatiron Building, and I remember seeing a guy, you know, 6'5", beautiful guy, long hair, perfect like pinstripe suit, but with white flip flops, walking across the street, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I hope this is the guy, you know, because I didn't know what he looked like. And sure enough, it was Henri. And I think the interview may have lasted 30 seconds. I could not wait to hire him. So it was just perfect. And I miss him. I mean, you know, we were together for many years there, and then he helped at Double Seven, and then he was at Jimmy until he moved to LA. So when I flipped on Billions this year and I saw Henri in the first episode, I was pretty excited.
Shout out Henri. I just saw him on this past Friday, but he does the door all the parties I do here in LA. So he's the doorman he's the hot doorman here in LA. Actor doorman, obviously. But getting back to Lotus, you know, it was for me personally and for a lot of my, you know, peers, it was such a moment in time. And I think that, you know, we had not seen anything like that up until that point. And I have called it for many years the Studio 54 of hip hop. For sure, during that time. It had something for everybody. You know, that Sunday party lasted, I think, maybe 7 years, if I'm correct. And, you know, it was just such a magical, special moment. And for me, Lotus in general, up until my nightclub experiences, I worked in clubs for probably 7, 8 years at that point. Lotus itself, and part of it, the reason I think Lotus in general was so successful is that, like, you know, we had weekly meetings, and, you know, I was getting paid every week on time, you know, things like that, things that weren't happening in prior nightclub experiences. We had a budget for decor, and, you know, that was my first experiences to those kind of things, and I think that's a large part of the reason that Lotus was so successful, because up until that point, for me, it was taken like a serious business, where other clubs were kind of just party. They weren't as thorough, and to be honest, so supportive. You mean so?
Well, thank you. I mean, that was really the great yin and yang of having me and Will sort of try and balance out the artist, you know, crazy part of Baker and Jaw. You know, I sort of play in the middle, but you know, you can't talk about Lotus without talking about, I mean, we had the most incredible crew of managers and servers and bartenders, and remarkably, they're all still friends. It's like they all went to college together or camp together or something. I mean, you know, they still have reunions. I went a couple years ago where we all played ping pong. There must have been 30 of them. They go to each other's weddings. I mean, it's the greatest group of people. And I think that we just got very lucky to assemble this wonderful crew that loved the crowd, and the crowd loved them. And I remember, I actually do remember when Marquee opened, which was sort of the first threat, if you will, with us. And some of our staff went to work there, and about half stayed, and about half came back because they just said they missed it so much, and they missed the people, and they missed the vibe. And, you know, we tried to run it in a very family-like way. And, you know, that's why I'm always teasing you and Frank that we need to do a Saturday version, because everyone has to get up these days, of a Sunday night party. So maybe that'll happen one day now when you're in New York.
Well, Frank is on here now. Let's put the pressure on him. You know I'm down. He's the one.
Okay, it's on
Um,
you, Frank.
but I also think too, Lotus, at that point, even just musically, the DJs, everything musically, it set the blueprint in a lot of ways for the next, I think, decade in nightlife. Whether it be like just the level of service, like you're saying, you had a great team, which you absolutely did. The level of service, it being a restaurant turned into club kind of seamlessly. And it was, at the time, I think, a really diverse club or moment when a lot of other places weren't diverse yet. I think, and it was very cultural at the time, and it kind of set the tone for the next decade, I think, for nightlife. So,
Well, that's very kind. I mean, we don't know. Look, if New York isn't mixed, it's not New York to me. When I go into places and they look homogeneous on any level, too gay, too straight, too black, too white, I don't get it. It's like New York is the greatest melting pot in the world.
give me a
That's
high
how.
five on that. Listen. I said 1 million times, black, white, gay, straight, rich, poor. That's the room I want to be in.
Yeah,
So not
1,000%.
yeah, nothing.
And I
I
didn't like
can't stand
walking
one
in.
of anything.
I didn't like walking in any night anywhere that we have ever had that it doesn't feel that way.
Yep.
I get a little unnerved because I'm like, that's why you come to New York. You come to New
Yep.
York for that great mix. And,
Yep.
you talked about the DJs. I mean, if you think about it, some of the people who started out at Lotus, I used to get jealous of the Obama administration had all our DJs play all their parties, I mean, Cassidy, D Nice. I mean, all these guys used to play. I was so flattered to hear it. I did not know this. A couple of years ago, um, a woman that I'm friendly with got, and David DeGraff was there too, but Idris Elba spun at Jimmy, and which was insane to me. Like, I got the text from Marcia saying, "Can Idris spin tonight?" And I'm kind of like, "Idris Elba? Like what?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Yeah, this is what he does to relax." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I kind of didn't believe it was going to happen, but I got there and he was spinning, and then he took a break, and D Nice went on, and I realized that I knew him back from Lotus. I hadn't done the math in my head, and I went up and I said, "Hey man, it's so good to see you." He goes, "Lotus changed my life." I'm like, "What do you mean, Lotus?" And he said, "Well, I was playing one Sunday night, and Puff was sitting with Frank at the booth right next to the DJ booth, and Puffy said, 'You need to come on tour with me.'" And he said, "It like that, my life has changed ever since that moment." I was like, I was so sort of proud that we were there in some way for that.
Well,
I see like Eric LaPose on here. What a great DJ.
yeah, Goldfinger's on here as well.
Too. Oh, nice. That's great.
Yep.
That's great.
I think John Lennon's on here too. So no, but I've seen you many times. Like Beverly Bond's on here as well, and I see you. I feel like you're everyone that went on to be successful. I know that makes you very happy, and I see you when you talk to them. And you're very proud, uncle or something.
I am exactly that. I'm so.
I know it's obvious.
I'm so thrilled for when I see the success of the people that we've been surrounded by, and I'm even like so in a goofy way. Like one of my favorite DJs back when I was a lawyer, she's gonna kill me for saying this. We'll assume she was 14. Was Belinda, and now Belinda plays at 2 or 3 of our spots, and she's still one of the best DJs that there is. And I have a video somewhere on Facebook or Instagram of Belinda and Erica spinning together. And
amazing.
And I wrote, our DJs are better than your DJs. I mean, what could be better than having those two girls spinning?
Erica's on here as well, and Belinda. I had Belinda on about 3 months ago, and talk about a cultural nightlife legend. She's amazing.
Oh,
so let me ask you this: how much of Lotus do you think was kind of like meticulously planned versus like how much was just kind of timing and luck?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, we definitely meticulously planned Lotus. I mean, so much thought went into the design and finding the right chef and assembling the right staff. To me, assembling the right staff is always really the most important thing. And we got extraordinarily lucky there because we just had the most kind, caring group of people. To this day, I mean, if you run into Susan or some of the other servers or Rachel, they're just wonderful people. And that, I think people felt their authenticity. It didn't feel like they were being hustled. Again, it was pre-bottle service, so there wasn't that pressure. And look, it was a thing that we used to fret about because we only had those 6 incredible tables. It's funny. I have a friend who's a screenwriter, and we thought when we were building Lotus, we thought the mezzanine was going to be, where it was going to be at. And my friend Chris came and he says, "Not. It's those 6 tables." He's like, they're just far enough removed. He goes, but the famous people are going to want to sit there So everyone knows they're in the room, but they're not going to want to be able to be reached. And it was exactly right. I mean, the only guy who went to mezzanine, and he went by himself, if you can imagine, it won't sound strange once I say it, was Prince. He went there and hung out by himself as if he wasn't there, but he was just grooving to the music and eating his dinner up there. But no matter, you know, I don't want to sit here and drop all these crazy names, but the most famous people in the world that you could imagine in that moment, they all sat at those 6 tables. But what we couldn't figure out was how to monetize them, because sometimes people would sit there and have 3 ginger ales, and you're like, oh my God, how are we going to pay the rent, the DJ, and the 10 security guys? So it was a learning experience, you know. But I am glad, in many ways, that we were not in that era where those tables just went to the highest bidder, because I think that was part of the culture of Lotus too.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say the real movie was right there. Those first 3-4 tables, that was the movie. That was the movie every Sunday at least for us. You know, so.
Although I will tell you that at the 6th table, the one sort of by the kitchen,
the back one, yes,
the back one, probably arguably the two at different times the 2 most famous people. One night it was Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, Danny DeVito at that table, and then a few weeks later was Halle Berry. Came in with a few friends of mine, and I will tell you, and I've since met her once, and she's delightful, but I didn't know her then. She stopped the room. She literally stopped the room. I mean, I don't care how famous or how beautiful you were. It was as if there was this amber glowing light that just followed her through Lotus as she went to the table. It was the most bizarre thing to this day I've ever seen. She was that beautiful. And I got to meet her like 2 years ago at the Skylark, and she was super, super nice. She didn't remember that night, but of course I do.
What are some other highlights from Lotus? Like, those are 2 great ones, by the way.
I would say, I mean, from Lotus, you know, like, you think, what it throw, if you go back and you think about, look, for me, highlights are really literally standing in the DJ booth, looking out at the floor and seeing, anonymously standing there and seeing how much fun people were having. I went up there one day to say hi to Mark Ronson, who, you know, was great and is so wonderful and unbelievably talented, and now has Oscars and Grammys. But I just went up to say hi to him, and I didn't stand in the DJ booth often enough. And I just happened to look out, and, you know, when you look out, you see 300-400 people that don't know you, don't care, and just are having the best time. And you're able to provide that environment. For me, that was a huge highlight. You know, if you talk about the celebrity highlights, I mean, Henri, I'm going to make him, since he's on the call, embarrass him. One night, Henri, who was, you know, arguably one of the greatest doormen of all time, walks in and he's like, David, can you, I'm not even going to try to do his beautiful accent, but he's like, David, can you believe this guy? He's outside in shorts and orange shoes and long hair, and he wants to come in. He's over, and I said, so what happened? He goes, I told him he couldn't come in. I'm like, that's Mario Batali. But Henri didn't know who he was at the moment, but he was, you know, in his orange Crocs and his whole thing. But I'd say the coolest call we ever got was from U2. They wanted to have the Edge's bachelor party there, and I got on the phone because I thought it was, you know, it's probably going to need a lot of attention to this, and I got on the phone with whomever was calling from them, and I'm like, so you want us to set aside a special room? They're like, no, the boys just want to hang out, and I'm like, oh, okay. And sure enough, the downstairs lounge, which was sort of not the priority, they went down there and they just hung out for 4 or 5 hours. And the girls were having this look on their face like, wow, that looks like Bono over there. That looks like the Edge. And it was. And they just danced with everyone there. That was what I liked about Lotus, was I think people dropped their guard. We didn't have to rope off a lot of people. People just interacted. They had fun. They didn't.
You're right.
Know, George Clooney was at the bar in a baseball cap and a jean jacket, and someone told me he was there, and I went over. I said, Mr. Clooney, can I get you a table? He's like, first of all, what's your name? I'm like, it's David. He goes, I'm George. I'm like, okay. He goes, and he said, I'm having the best time I've ever had. I'll take a bud. And that was it. Like, he was relaxed as could be. He didn't need any. So I think for whatever reason, it had some sort of magic about it that people let their guard down and just went there to have
You're
fun.
right.
And they weren't uptight about it. And they weren't expecting to be cordoned off. And so that was its specialness to me.
Well, there was something really inclusive. Now that you say it, I totally agree. There was something really inclusive about it, where I don't think the celebrities felt necessarily, you know, elevated. It's like we're all there listening to the same music, having a great time, getting drunk and having fun. I feel like everyone's getting drunk at Lotus all the time. I feel.
They were.
I remember you and I kind of like about 4 or 5 years into the Sunday night, just looking at each other, kind of locking eyes and just being like, "This is insane!" Like in a great way. But I remember, yeah, you and I kind of like high fiving or something, being like insane.
There was such a beautiful energy to Sunday night. I don't really know how to. Everyone was so happy to be there. The music was, for me, the best music of every night that we had, and that was really the night that felt most family-like to me.
Yeah.
That first table with, with Sade there all the time, and it was just fantastic.
Well, it was a fun time. Well, Nellie, who's on here as well, Nellie, she used to work at Pastis, and when it was only Pastis, Florent, Lotus, and Jeffries, and I had been telling her to come. We met there, and I told her about 3 or 4 weeks to come. She didn't come. She finally came, and she came every single week after that. That's how it was. You come one time, you come for the rest of the, you come forever then.
It's funny, Nellie, forgive me, but I thought of you the other night because I still have a 10 Cane Rum T-shirt from when she was on the giant billboard. When she was working at Pastis, she was also on a gigantic billboard for 10 Cane Rum. And they had some party at Lotus, and I have this great long sleeve T-shirt. Whenever I wear it, I think of Nellie. So
I need that shirt. I want a shirt. Okay, so after Lotus, we did Double Seven, or not after, but during kind of, and again, Double Seven to me at the time was again set like this new kind of blueprint where Double Seven was very small, ultra exclusive, very expensive, amazing drinks, and just ultra chic in a new way that things weren't at the time, So I think that
I was super proud of Double Seven because
I love Double Seven. I loved it.
It happened by accident, honestly, because I kept hearing about Milk and Honey, and I hadn't gone because I know it sounds strange for me to say at the time, but I thought like, how am I going to get into Milk and Honey? Because I knew it only had 22 seats, and I didn't know the guys. And I went one night, and Sasha took care of us. May rest in peace. He was such a genius, and I really had never had drinks like that. Like anyone else at that time, I was vodka cranberry or whatever we had. And I went there, and it was a revelation. And I thought, my God, for lack of a better phrase, if the Vogue crowd knew that these kind of cocktails existed and we could provide them a beautiful room, and we stumbled across, I was in LA a lot at the time, we stumbled across this amazing designer. I went to like 3 or 4 restaurants that I liked a lot. Turned out it was the same designer. I had a friend who put me in touch with him, and we were able to create, as you said, an 80, 85 person room directly across the street from Lotus. The hard part was that everyone at Lotus, and justifiably after that many years, felt like they were our close friends. And they were. But one room holds 600, one holds 80. It was a very difficult dance to do with some of the old school folks. And again, we got really lucky because, as you know, Damien did that door. And he was marvelous because he's, charming beyond belief, bright, diplomatic, never like you, like Henri. You guys. The hardest part about being a door person, I think, is when you have to say no, but you leave people intact with their dignity, and you let them understand at another time. And he was great at that. And it was a difficult thing because people would literally just walk across the street. They're like, "Oh, it's across the street. I'll go over there." It was a shame. I mean, I don't know if anyone ever really knows the story about that because people are like, well, what happened to it? If you remember the neighborhood, Apple came to the neighborhood at $185 a square feet. We were paying $60. And then Hugo Boss came at $525 a square foot. So all of a sudden our building became extremely valuable. And the landlord opted to pay us a very low fee that we had foolishly negotiated, but our investors were real estate guys. They said, oh, they'll never exercise this clause. No one ever kicks anyone out. So we're like, okay. Well, sure enough, 2 years later, the neighborhood exploded, literally exploded, and he exercised the clause and pushed us out at the height of our business. So we were never really able to bring, we brought it back, as you know, 3 years later. It was supposed to be 6 months later, but that family, the Gottlieb family, which owns pretty much half the meatpacking district, they went into huge litigation when the founder of the empire died. And so by the time 7 came back, it wasn't the same, unfortunately, the same magic. But I agree. And there was a nice interplay. And, you know, to be honest, people used to go from 7, they'd tell me around 2:30 that they were on their way to Bungalow 8, and I was all about it. I'm like, fantastic, because you're already a little bit gone beyond our, and Amy's the best hostess on the planet. And I'm like, go ahead, go get on with your pants off. And I sometimes would go at 3:30 on the way home. The problem is if you went at 3:30, there might be a chance you get locked in there and not be out until 6:30. And that didn't fly too well in my house.
That's true. Bungalow 8 did get good around 2:33. That's right. I totally forgot. I mean,
yeah.
in fact, you're like, please join Amy. It's 2:45. You know, like, please join Amy.
I was good with it.
So then you did Skylark in Midtown, which again was kind of it's the gorgeous view. I think Skylark's large. You know, it's a very large space. There's a lot of different, you know, little nooks and crannies and things. And then why did you do Midtown? Like, why Midtown?
Well, it all sort of happened accidentally, to be honest. As Lotus was slowing down and we were getting ready to sell it, eventually to Mark and Eugene, who did Abe and Arthur's there, Sims, who was one of our great GMs at Lotus, got in touch with me and offered me Jimmy, the rooftop of the James. And I went to Will and Ja and Baker, and I was like, let's go do this rooftop. And they were, no. We did have 3 or 4 other deals pending, but as you know from our business, you can always have a million deals pending, and then often none of them happen. And I'm like, guys, this is an 18th floor rooftop overlooking all of Soho and New Jersey and Brooklyn with a pool. I said, one more time, you know, I'm doing it. I want you to do it with me. And they opted out. So I ended up doing Jimmy with 2 other partners, and it was so successful, and we had no idea. I mean, that was very early in the days of rooftops. And then we did Lamb's Club almost simultaneously, which for 4 or 5 years was the daytime hangout for Vogue at that moment, because Condé Nast was a block away. So it was sort of Anna Wintour's lunch spot. And because of those 2 things, the guy who was building the Skylark had a mutual friend of mine, of ours, call me and asked if I'd meet with him. And I went there, and he showed it to me. And as he said, it's insane. I mean, it's the 32nd floor of a building overlooking basically all of New York. And I basically said, you know, congratulations. This is going to be amazing. Best of luck. And he said, will you mind reading my business plan over the weekend? And I'm like, okay. And I read his plan, and he called me that Monday. He goes, well, what do you think? And I said, Bob, I hate to say this to you. And he said, no, please. That's why I wanted to meet you. I said, I think it's going to fail. And he said, what do you mean fail? And I said, well, no one's coming to a Models and Bottles nightclub on 39th and 7th. It's just not where they're coming. They'll come for an hour until the 3 Grey Goose runs out. But really, this should be an aspirational venue, like almost like a Soho House, like an after work, beautiful. You know, if we get lucky and get busy at 10 o'clock, 11 at night, great. But really, let's focus on 5 to 8 o'clock. And on weekends, let's not even open and do weddings. And he called me a few days later, and he said, you know, I really prefer if you run it. And he put me in touch with Abigail Kirsch, which is, you know, sort of the gold standard of caterers in New York. And it's worked out, you know, really well. I mean, right now, Midtown is not, you know, for those of you who are in New York or not in New York, but know New York, Midtown, I would say, is the slowest part of Manhattan right now, because there's no Broadway and no one's coming to their offices. But the Skylark has had a good 6-year run, and will reopen in April, and hopefully it'll go well. But it all comes from Jimmy. It all comes from that one little rooftop down in Soho.
Got it. I thought for some reason that Skylark was first, but the brilliance of Jimmy, in my opinion, was there's nothing like that. There was nothing like that at the time. Like, you know, it's a gorgeous view, had a pool, it was still small and very chic. It was amazing, and it was again kind of like nothing like it at the time, I thought. So I mean, and excellent DJs, like amazing DJ lineup, always really curated DJs, amazing. So
our DJs are so much a part of what we do, and so there's a bunch of them on here. I mean, we're so identifiable, and we don't, it's important to me, and I know that a lot of other people like to run their businesses different ways, but for me, what's been important in our programming is that it's consistent. I don't want people to have to guess. What night is it at this place? What kind?
Yeah.
Is it techno night? Is it this night? Is it deep house? If you want that, there's plenty of places to go. Great,
That's smart.
go have a good time. But if
Yeah.
you come to us, you're going to hear new and old school hip hop, funk, soul, reggae.
Yep.
You're gonna know 90% of the songs. They're gonna be mixed exquisitely by great looking, fun, upbeat DJs. We've had DJs. Some of them have since Rex. Shorty still plays for us. Eric's been with us since Lotus. There's people who've been with us for 15, 20 years. They play at Skylark as well. And so that's sort of a consistency. And, when I don't want to jump around your thing too much, but, when I was consulting, and I still am, I guess I'm on furlough, but for the Venetian, basically when we did the Dorsey, I said the same thing. Look, everyone in Vegas is playing techno or deep house, or no one is playing old school funk, soul. There's no one playing Tribe Called Quest. And, and I said, if we stick to our guns, we'll have a big following. And it's worked out phenomenally well, because people were like, oh my God, this is the music I really want to hear.
It's interesting you said, because you're right. You for the last 15 years or something, you've been so consistent musically. You know exactly, like I know if I'm going to somewhere that you're involved in, I know exactly what I'm getting, which is great. That's a great thread through it all. Is that it's been musically exactly what you're getting. So something else I want to bring up is that besides our love of hip hop, you and I, we both have a love for fitness. So it's really interesting. I love working out. I've worked out for at least 15, 20 years maybe. I've always been active and healthy, but I think the nightlife versus health or fitness has always been very important to me. But what are your thoughts on that? And I think it's extremely important. That's the only way you can succeed and thrive, I think, in the business. So,
well, for me, it's definitely my therapy, and I've played sports my whole life. I mean, today I played tennis, and I rode my, partially because of the subway system in New York, and I'm not that interested in being in it at the moment, but I've been city biking everywhere now, and it's got the double whammy. But you're right, for me, our business is so tough on you hours wise, and we've all seen so many people sort of tumble down the stairs, if you will, that I've been really careful. I mean, I keep reaching for a drink. It's Coke Zero. That's my bad vice, but it's not rum. But no, you're right. Like, I know how fit you are, and for me, I still exercise 5-6 days a week. I'm currently having the debate as to whether or not I'm going to go back to Equinox or not, because they just reopened a few days ago. I'm not really sure where I net out on that.
I would wait.
I'm likely to wait. Me and my son have put together a little bit of a home gym, and we've been sort of doing it here. I'm not eager to go back into that room. But.
Yeah, I wouldn't. And then if you had to summarize, let's say, nightlife, obviously, the 2000 era, but if you had to summarize nightlife from like 2010 to 2020, like how do you describe it? Bottle service, or like what do you think the last decade of nightlife has been?
For me, it's changed a lot, and I do think part of it is the crazy cost of real estate. That it's a chicken and egg. Which started? Was it bottle service drove it, or was it really that people had to spend so much money on rent for their venues that they had no choice but to take in that much money? But I think there's other things, Damon, that are just I've thought about it a lot. I think a lot of the people that I know that used to treat New York as their playground, when I see them at one of our restaurants now, like if I see them at Cafe Clover or I see them at American Bar, and I say, "Where are you going after dinner?" They look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, "I'm going to bed. I have 6 o'clock yoga, or I have 6 o'clock meditation." Or I feel like a lot of the people who were agenda setters in the early 2000s are now, when they're on the road, because festival life became so important. And I'm including in that not just music festivals, but also South by Southwest or Art Basel. I mean, God knows what's going to happen with the pandemic. But I feel like a lot of those, like the coolest girls who were all in PR, and they always set the agenda, right? Someone was working in PR for Chanel, or working for PR for Y3 or something like that, and they always knew this is the best party, this is the best DJ, this is the best club. I feel like those people now, or normally would be now their go crazy time is Coachella, Burning Man, Art Basel, South by Southwest, and when they're in New York, they're almost being healthier. I also think that the city's spread out a lot. So whereas Brooklyn, you know, you used to have to come to a Lotus or a Double Seven if you wanted to be in that mix. And now
Yeah.
there's viable places in other boroughs. And lastly, and I don't know enough about this because, to be honest, I've never been on it. I'm not allowed to be. But I mean, I think you can't underestimate the impact of Tinder and other things like that. I mean, there was none of that in the early 2000s. If you wanted to meet,
That's true. Yeah.
if
You're
you
right.
wanted to meet someone of the opposite sex or the same sex, you had to go out. Now you can sit home and, you know, swipe your phone and then say, meet me at the wine bar. You know, you don't
And
need
also,
to go to Lotus.
you're watching someone else's party on Instagram stories while you're Tindering. Why go out? You mean, and drink a
Right.
bottle of wine? You know, so you're right. I do agree with you that the festival life, let's call it festivals, in the broad term, they definitely in the last decade have gotten so much more. First of all, more of them are popping up left and right, and they're gotten so much more focused. Yeah, people wait the 2 months to do that, and then kind of chill in the interim. You're right.
I mean, that, you know, I cannot tell you how many people have looked at me like I had two heads when I said, we're on a Thursday night, 10 o'clock. I mean, I would never have been home on a Thursday night at 10 o'clock when I was 30 years old. You know, I was eating dinner out late somewhere, finishing dinner at 10:30, and then going to 2 or 3 venues. And they would look at me like I'm bonkers. So it's a shame.
And then what do you not COVID related, but what do you think the next thing would be for the next decade or next 5 years or something, nightlife wise?
I still think people are well, look, I think and I don't want to say that we did it alone because Sasha certainly did it at Milk and Honey on his own, but I think this culture of, I mean, everywhere you go now has to have a high-end, highly curated cocktail menu. I don't think that's going away anytime soon, but I do think the trend towards, I don't think New York, and I think it is partially COVID related, I don't think it's going to be a late night city again anytime really soon. Partially because there's things like the MTA. I mean, people are saying to us like, well, why are you closing at 11? Why is, well, it's actually, we almost have to because the MTA closes at 1 now. And so to get our staff home. So I don't know when that's going to change, but I think the fun, the pastis kind of Balthazar dining experience, or a catch, if you will, those kind of things. I think, look, for me, my personal preference is to go to an old school favorite like an Odeon or an Indochine or, that. But I certainly, you cannot argue with what's going on at Catch or Tao Downtown or Havre. I mean, I hear so much more about that than I do about any kind of club. I hear much, much more about what the new fun, cool restaurant is that's hopping at midnight than I do. So I think that's for New York. And I think to be honest, and I know this is a little self-serving, but one of the things I like about Jimmy is that I don't see a lot of FOMO. People are pretty happy to be there. They're with their group. They're not staring at their phone all night to wonder where they should be. They're just kind of content to be with their crowd. And we're working on a couple more. And God, I hope that it all goes forward. You never know. We're working on an Indian restaurant that I think is going to be one of those spots that people just want to hang. We're hoping to bring back Temple Bar. We're negotiating with the landlord to sort of get rent into line with what's going on in the world right now, and I think we're going to get there.
Amazing.
But yeah, I would not be someone searching for the 600-person club venue right now. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Because what I have heard from some people, and I think they may be right, Damon, is that because rents are going to come down because so much more space is going to be available, that clubs may be able to go back to what they were when we started this conversation, which was more about the fun and the soul of it than about who could pay the most for a table.
Oh, no, I totally agree. I believe, my personal prediction is that, it's going to go back to like that 80s kind of thing where it's going to be, a little more dangerous, a little more, creative, all those things, all the things that the 80s were. I feel like that's going to be what's happening the next couple of years in New York.
Oh my God, we went to some crazy. I mean, I used to go out with, I'm sure Brenton and Bobito, who back then, and he hates when I said that he was called Bobby Nice back then because he was such a great basketball player. We would go to the most random hip hop clubs, hip hop was in mid 80s. That was sort of a new thing, and we would go to these random places on the Lower East Side. no joke, people were smoking crack in these venues, and
Yeah.
we just went for the music, and the sound system. I remember the sound system at Mars, which was on the far west side, and Rudolph was running it. The sound system, it vibrated through your whole body,
Yep.
But that was when nightlife was felt dangerous and fun and exciting.
But I think, for me personally, I think that's where it's going to head, and I think that there's going to be so much creativity and so much artists and so much great music that comes out of the next 5 years in New York. That's just my personal opinion. Like it was in the 80s.
Yeah,
so.
Well, wouldn't it be great if the next great Basquiat or Haring arrived and was doing murals inside a venue? And
I think that's what's next. So we have 3 minutes left, but I want to say a few things. So I think what's going to happen is it's going to at 1 hour just end. So I'm just going to come back on, and you just join again. Okay.
Okay.
Not much longer, but I just want to say a few more things before we go.
Cool.
First of all, I do want to say that you have been a huge champion of diversity since I've known you, and really authentically and genuinely. I noticed that about you when I first met you, and is that something that you were conscious of? Were you even every staff that every venue you've ever had has been extremely diverse, the staff, things like that. Is that something that you were conscious of, or were you just kind of doing it based off of a vibe?
I was lucky. I have very, very enlightened parents. My dad has passed away, but they were very involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s, and I was sort of always raised around black folk. Obviously white Jewish kid in Long Island, but my father's best friend from college was, I actually, when I was 2 or 3 years old, I asked if he was my uncle because those were the people we saw the most. So I just assumed he was my uncle. And it was sort of a natural progression for me. I mean, even, I played sports in college, and a lot of my friends were people of color. And then going out to all the hip hop venues, as I mentioned, in New York, that's what felt like New York to me. And I always felt that our staff should reflect that as well, because I thought that would, I don't think it was conscious like, oh, we need another Latin person or we need another Asian person. We go for the best. I mean, Monica at Lotus crushed it. How many, and then she became a full partner at the Double Seven. I read these things that I'm almost puzzled when I read the need for empowering women. I mean, obviously that's true, and empowering people of minorities or people of color. Like, we always just handed the keys to the most capable person. So whether that was Acacia, who we turned over the place in Vegas to in 2001 and said, go run this, and she crushed it, Southeast Asian woman from London, or Monica, who ran the platform at Lotus for 6 years and then took over and ran the Double Seven. I mean, you give it to the talent, but look, as you know, and maybe some people know, I'm married to a woman of color. My son is mixed race. It's just what's natural to me. It's not it's not an intention in the sense of like I